Hi all, Angela Hayes here with Senta. So lately it seems that organizational design conversations are showing up everywhere. And what's interesting is that the nature of those conversations have shifted. So historically, org design discussions often centered around reporting relationships, job titles, levels, and those things still matter, but what I'm seeing now is a much greater focus on how the work actually gets done. How does the work flow through the organization? How are decisions made? What work should remain with humans and what should be automated? What skills does the company need in the future? Now, I can hear some of you saying that was already part of org design, and while that's true, that's not often the place that leaders have started when they think about shaping and designing their teams. So AI is certainly accelerating these conversations. It's also making sure that these conversations are now happening on a much more regular basis. So, in the past, org design discussions often took place when it came to large company events. So, whether that's mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, workforce reductions, unfortunately, maybe the strategy of the company has shifted, needing to redesign the work, or during regular talent cycles, whether that's performance, succession planning, budget reviews. But today, many leaders are thinking about org design on a much more regular basis, and that's important because what I've found is that when leaders wait until these major company events to intentionally think about the org design, they often find themselves underprepared and overwhelmed. And often at these times is when there's an expectation to operate with speed and urgency. So if you're unprepared, that's when mistakes happen. It also creates challenges in how we best support our employees through these changes. So today I want to share with you 4 practices that I have seen work particularly well. These are habits that you can build into your day-to-day work to not only be an effective leader, but also help make better decisions when those large changes actually do become necessary. So first is just track and evaluate how the work evolves on your team. And if you have other people leaders reporting to you, expect that they do the same thing. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is assuming that job descriptions, org charts, workforce data in an HR system accurately reflects how the work is actually happening. In reality, work is changing all the time. A new initiative comes down and you need to decide who owns that work. An employee wants to grow, so you create a stretch opportunity for them. A new technology comes in and it shifts how the work is getting done. Maybe someone leaves the company or goes out on an extended leave of absence and you're redistributing work. These changes are happening constantly. So as leaders, you're the people that are the closest to the work. You understand where work gets stuck, how responsibilities have evolved, where capacity challenges exist, what has changed since the last time the org chart was actually officially updated. So creating an environment where these day-to-day changes are made visible and evaluated is critical. It also means that when those large company initiatives do come forward, you aren't relying on memory in a moment of pressure when you've had months or years of changes building up on your team. And additionally, the leaders who do this effectively, they aren't just tracking what changed, but they're tracking why it changed. And just as importantly, they're evaluating whether the changes actually were effective. So did it support the employees' growth? Did the improved efficiency actually come to fruition? Did we accidentally create new bottlenecks that we didn't intend to create? Did the change solve the problem that it was intended to solve? These little changes, they do add up over time. And the team that you started with might look very different months or years later, even if the formal structure hasn't changed on paper. So if you track these changes, evaluate whether they are effective, that helps you pivot in the short term when adjustments need to be made. But it also ensures that, again, when these larger organizational decisions need to happen, you're working off of accurate information of how the work is actually getting done on your team, and not just how it was originally designed. One reason that this also matters is that restructuring in particular doesn't always come with a long runway. Earlier in my career, I supported a company who was being acquired, and we had a 2-day notice of the acquisition to prepare the company and the team for what that meant. So in moments like this, you need to operate quickly, but you also need to operate with accurate information. The leaders who have been tracking how the work evolves aren't relying on memory. They have the information that they need. And moreover, if you happen to not be in the room when these conversations and decisions are being made, because a lot of larger company restructures happen in tight circles, you have more confidence that the decisions being made about your team are at least being made off of a better understanding of how the work is actually happening and the current state of your team. Secondly, and I think most important, is to truly understand your employees. And I mean beyond just their titles, reporting relationships, headcount numbers. And I don't mean to know every detail about someone's personal life, but the strongest leaders understand the strengths of their people. They understand who is developing expertise, who is looking for their next step and a broader set of experiences. They understand what motivates and energizes their team members. They also equally understand what frustrates them, what work drains them. They know where the capacity challenges are on the team, who's overloaded and maybe potentially going to burn out, who has capacity to take on more. Effective leaders also understand where the work gets stuck, where are there friction points, where is there risk that is emerging, where are there single points of failure. At its core, organizational design is about aligning work and talent, and it's very difficult to do that well if you don't deeply understand both the work and your employees. So the better you understand your people, the better decisions you'll make about the work. Third, expect the leaders on your team to create visibility for their employees. This is something that I see underestimated all the time. There are teams that are doing incredible work across organizations, and very few people outside of those teams understand the impact that they are creating. Visibility matters. It matters during budget decisions. It matters during succession planning. It matters when decisions are being made about where additional resources should go. So it's important that you create those opportunities for your team members to share their work, celebrate their accomplishments. And I'm not talking about self-promotion. I'm talking about helping the organization understand the value being created by your team. Because it's difficult to invest in work that isn't visible, and it's difficult to advocate for resources when the impact is not understood. And finally, allow yourself and the leaders on your team to think creatively about talent. One of the things that I love the most about people leadership is that people are not actually interchangeable. The reality is that many roles evolve because of the unique strengths of the person in that role. You hire someone and they bring a capability that wasn't in the original design, but benefits both the company and that employee, and that's amazing. You recognize as a leader the potential in someone and expand their responsibilities. That is often where some of the most valuable evolution of org design happens. But it's also important to recognize that eventually, if that employee moves on, the role that you're backfilling might look very different than the original role that existed. So at the end of the day, as companies continue to think about AI, workforce transformations, org design, executives need to have better information than they've historically had access to. And that information doesn't come from org charts alone. It comes from leaders who understand their people, understand the work, and pay attention about how both evolve over time. The best org design work starts long before restructuring begins. And it starts with leaders who are creating visibility, developing talent, and continuously evaluating how the work gets done. Those leaders are much better positioned when those larger changes do become necessary because they aren't scrambling to understand the current state of their organization. They already know, they've been paying attention all along. And if they aren't in the room, they aren't worried that decisions are being made on outdated data sets or assumptions. In my experience, those leaders are better positioned to advocate for their teams, create meaningful development opportunities, and make thoughtful decisions with speed and urgency when changes do become necessary. So I hope this was helpful. As always, remember humans first, resources second. Until next time, thank you.